about you. But everything I do is about seeing Jesus. I want to see Jesus. Hallelujah. I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Get into my rest. I don't know about you, but I'm pressing for some new things. You got to come into new applications, new operations, new manifestations. You hear what I'm saying? Hallelujah. You can't do it like you used to do it. Right along through here. God's getting ready to do some stuff. Hallelujah. 2019, the Lord gave me a word. I've been teaching it and prepping it since November. Now getting my church ready, and I started even meeting with my leadership classes, and God let me know that 2019 actually in the Hebrew calendar is 5779, and all of those numbers are significant there, biblically, numerically. 5, the number of grace. The 7, the number of completion. Twice 7 is 14, or the double anointing. And then 9, the number of gestation and producing of fruit. Look in Corinthians 12, you'll see the gifts of the Spirit and the fruit of the Spirit. And 9, it produces, it brings forth new offspring. Are you hearing me? All right. New birth, new manifestation. And 2019 is not unlike that. It ends in the 9 with the same situation. Of course, 20 being the number of double cyclical, 10 and any other number is perfect in its application of multiplication. I said this often, 10 times 10, 100 times 100, 1,000, 10 times 1,000, 100,000, 10 times 100,000, a million, so on. So you simply add the 0 because it's a cycle, and a cyclical perfection. We're in that season where God is getting ready to do something with us cyclically, and if you stay in the process, you will progress. See, a lot of times people, they upset with the pastor. They upset because they got out the process. But yet they want time spent to account. They say, well, I've been in this X number of years, and by now I think, but how long have you been in the process? See, you can't go in and out of the process and progress at the same speed of somebody that's staying in process. That's diligently seeking Him. See, the reward comes with diligently seeking Him. And so what God is trying to show us in 2019 is the prepping year. 19 is the prepping year. We are in a Trinity manifestation of years. He told me, he woke me up and said, son, tell your people wherever you go on the road, begin to share it. He said, because I'm sharing it in the earth. I'm sharing it in the earth. What I'm getting ready to do, I'll do nothing until I let my prophets know. You begin to share it in the earth. And 2019 is a prepping year. We're going to be prepping for 2020. 2019 is a year of birthing and gestation and bringing forth, and there's a prepping in that year. It's prepping you for 2020. 2020 is the year of perfected vision. In the natural, 2020 is perfect vision. The year 2020 is perfected vision. In other words, God is perfecting some of that stuff you thought you saw, thought you knew, thought you understood. The revelation that you saw in part, you saw through a glass darkly. Yeah. God is going to perfect that, and He's going to show you some things, and He's going to manifest it in self-evident truth that all you're going to be able to do is shake your head and say, this is God. This must be God. Hallelujah. But you got to be prepped so you can have the best vantage point. 36 years. This didn't just happen. There was vision that took place to precede the manifestation. God gives a blueprint of revelation before there can be application, you must be faithful to the process. And if you be faithful to the process, you'll progress.
All right.
2020 is a year of perfected vision, folks. Perfected. God's going to show you some things. You're going to see revelation all throughout the land. And we really need it in our land because we got some real things going on at the highest places in the land. So we have to intercede, and we have to intercede with strategic power. By that I mean, you're just not praying down, lay me down to sleep. You're praying in accordance to the conflict that you have in the land, and you're praying and you're pulling down strongholds in the land. And not only that, the weapon of your warfare is not carnal, but mighty in the pulling down strongholds, and the fervent effectual prayer of the righteous avail much. So you have power to affect change. I don't care what they say. I don't care, hallelujah, what's going on. You have power. God's going to show you the operation of the power He put in you. Because it's a sad thing to have something you don't know you have. All right. It's a sad thing to be armed for battle and you running around with a pop gun. Come on, somebody. Hallelujah. When the bear come in and you armed for battle, but you shooting scalpels. Come on, somebody. Hallelujah. Wondering, why the Lord ain't help me? Where the angels at? You loaded for battle. Come on, somebody. We got to know and understand what we're carrying and how to move into it with forceful power. And so God began to give me some things here. As a matter of fact, tomorrow morning we'll be in our first workshop. We have a series of 7 workshops. I went through 7 weeks of teaching. Faith comes by hearing, and that by the word of God. And now the next 7 weeks we will be training. We'll be training based on what we have been teaching, because we can't just come to church and hear it. You got to be ready. They take you through 6 weeks of basic training. It's because they want you to get used to the fire. Come on, somebody. They want you to get used to your face in the mud. Hallelujah. You being in uncomfortable situations and you continuing in the process. You hear what I'm saying? And they call it the service. Hallelujah. You and I are servants, and we are in the service. And we have to endure hardness as good soldiers. That's what the scripture says. So we're in a place now that God is saying, he said, son, there are 7 sight lines to this vision. There are 7. In Proverbs 29 and 12, and 18, it says, where there's no vision, people perish. You know, when you don't have vision, then you cease to be vibrant or have vigor. All right? When you don't have vision, you can lose your vigor. You can lose your intensity. Don't believe it. Go home and turn the lights out in your room. Get it as dark as you can and start walking through there. Find out that you will slow down. You won't run through there vigorously because you may knock something over because you can't see. So when you don't have vision, you slow down. When you don't have vision, you grow. When you don't have vision, you're putting your hands out and using other skill sets for your sensitivity. You're feeling your way. Y'all don't hear me. Hallelujah. You're feeling your way. You're listening to hear. You're doing. But when you have vision, you can just bust a move. You can just go where you're going. God has given us vision in 2020 that's going to be perfected, and to such a degree that you'll be able to move much faster than you've been moving before. And as a result of you moving much faster, you're going to see things in a much quicker pace. See, when you're taking quantum leaps, you can see where this fits with this. Hallelujah. Y'all don't hear me. When you take little baby steps, you don't know where it's going to end up at. But when you take a quantum leap, you say, oh, I see where this is connected to this. You take another quantum leap, you say, oh, I see this. I can connect the dots. God is going to allow us now to get a panoramic view with speed that's going to allow us to connect dots so that we can not only see where we're going, but take advantage of where we are. Oh, Lord, hear me. Hallelujah. When you grow, you don't take advantage of where you are. When you don't see, you're timid. When you don't see, I tell you this, you scared. Hallelujah. Fear sets in when you don't see. Hallelujah. So God has said, I'm giving you supernatural vision to bring you into a supernatural place so that you can begin to get the brand new. Because you're not going to access the new with old sight lines. Right. You can't look at it in the old. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. That's why we walk by faith and not by sight. Because if we walk by sight, we start looking at the old landmarks. We can be like those folks that walked in the desert looking up at the brazen serpent. But that season was over. It was over. They were still trying to watch the brazen serpent. Look, God is saying that was a sight line for the time, and the time is over. So don't keep on trying to memorialize things, hallelujah, from old sight lines. I want to show you something new to get you where I'm trying to take you now. I want to show you something new to manifest the new fruit. I want to show you something new to get you into the area of mass production. Come on, somebody. See, it's time out for onesie Tuesday. God wants to get you into mass production. He don't just want you to be productive. He wants you to be massively productive. He wants you producing on a large scale, because one of his names is the Lord of the increase. And because he is the Lord of the increase, I don't know if you knew it or not, that's what he's looking for from you, is increase. He's the Lord of the increase. He's looking for increase from us. So he gave me these sight lines. And he said, son, there is vision, but my people don't understand that each sight line shows you something different, and you have to be able to develop these sight lines of visions in order to take advantage of what I'm going to do in 2020. You got to be able to see things, because there's going to be a lot of counterfeits in the land. There's going to be a lot of delusion in the land. There's going to be a lot of lying in the land. Ooh, ain't that happening now? Amen. Lying at the highest split. In fact, nobody even think about, some of the stuff that's being said now, even it's true. It then left the credibility, the credibility in our land now in the highest places is at an all-time low. And deception can be produced in that environment. In other words, when the environment gets the way it is now, where it's a low standard and a low production of that standard, then what happens is nobody is able to really set the standard high without some level of opposition. That's why, they don't want Christians to say nothing.
That's right.
They try. I don't know if you know it. They trying to cut our voice off in the land. Mm-hmm. Hallelujah. Yes, the devil don't want you saying that, because the devil know the word is power, and he know if you keep on saying what God says, there's going to be a manifestation of God in the land. He knows if you keep using the word, that the word won't return God void, and those things that it will accomplish, those things thereto it was sent. He knows that at the name of Jesus, demons tremble, and whole regiments that he has assigned run. Come on, somebody. At the name of Jesus. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. When we say Jesus, demons scramble. Hallelujah. And when you say it and walk like it, oh my God, in your suit, hallelujah. When your foot shouting the preparation of peace, you got the helmet of salvation, the breastplate, hallelujah, faith, the shield of faith, hallelujah, and the sword, which is the word of God. And on top of that, you screaming Jesus. Demons flee. So what happens is this: is the enemy is trying to empower agents in the land to quiet Christians. We got to get bold in 2020. We got to cry loud and spare not. be dumb dogs who won't bark. Come on, somebody. We got a hallelujah. We got a hallelujah. Tell it like it. Hallelujah. Tears. Hallelujah. Bishop Williams used to say, tell it like it. T-I-S-T. We got to tell it like it is, man. And we got to scream it now. Because in doing so, it's going to open up the sight lines. The first sight line is discernment. Discernment vision. God has given us vision for this season. And the number one sight line is discernment vision. What's happening is we're in a place now where we're in the pursuit of divine vision. And as we pursue divine vision, it's for the coming purposes of God. God's got purposes that for us, purposes established in you and I, purposes established in the land, purposes established on the globe, and he needs facilitators of the purpose. He needs people who will be strong and of a good courage. He needs people who will be dogmatic like a Joshua that said, lead the sun up and I'll beat your enemies into the dust. He needs people that have a commitment to doing what he says, to see it like he's seen it, and go like he says to go. So as we look at this and these sight lines, the discerning vision helps bring an antidote, or it addresses things in the land that we have. One is deception. Deception. When you're able to discern between good and evil, then you don't fall prey to deception. And when you have the ability to see it, then you have a responsibility to tell others.
Yeah.
All right. So deception is, discerning vision is an antidote for deception, for delusion, for strife and debate, for division. It IDs the spirit. It IDs whether the spirit is good or evil, whether it is profitable or it is non-profitable, whether it is a lying spirit or it is the truth. Because there is a lying spirit in the land. Yes. There is a lying spirit that's been sent in the land, and unless you have the ability to discern, you're going to be in a situation where even if you don't believe what you hear, you'll be mobilized by it because you won't know. Amen. You'll be immobilized. You ever seen a rabbit in the street and you driving, and as soon as the lights hit it, he just stops.
It freezes, right?
You be like, why don't you just hop on across the street and get on out the way? I ain't there yet. But that fear grips him. He don't know which way to go. He's in a situation where he's surrounded by peril, so he just stops. He freezes. The devil's trying to freeze you. And he does it with deception. Because if he can just slow you down and stop you from advancing, then he can bring division. If he can slow you down and stop you from advancing, then he can bring strife and debate. So we know if the devil have us arguing with ourselves about what was said, God gives us the ability. In this season, he's developing our discerning vision. Then the next one is revelation vision. God is showing us some things by revelation. And the things that he's showing us by revelation is revealing the truth. It's the discovery of hidden mysteries of God. It is relaying the diverse seasons and times and dispensations for the operation of God. It is God showing us, son, this is the season of that. Son, this is that operation. Son, this is how you move. This is a kairos moment. This is a chronos moment. Here's what you do. He's giving us revelation vision. So we have to be in a position to where we understand it. Amen. Then there's faith vision. Faith vision develops your sight. Your sight lines, and it develops it through prayer and through the Spirit. It builds you through edifying your spirit, and it gives you sensitivity. It gives you sensitivity to understand realms. It gives you sensitivity to understand levels. It gives you sensitivities to understand dimensions. Faith vision is very important during the season because it's going to provide guidance and teaching and leadership by the Holy Spirit to advance the truths. See, God has set before us an open door that's in 2020. There's an open door that God has set before us. All right? But in order to take full advantage of it, you're going to have to do some prepping in 2019. You're going to have to be ready. Hallelujah. When I played basketball in college, I didn't just show up on game day, hallelujah, and get my uniform and run out to play. It don't work like that. You condition. You condition in the preseason. You getting up, 100, 500, 700 jump shots. You're doing what you got to do so that you're in condition to go into that conflict and succeed. You're not just showing up, hallelujah, because you got talent. Hallelujah. Unconditioned talent is one of the worst things, hallelujah, because you think you can do something because you had a skill set, and then you find out under adversity you can't. And many people quit because they say I'm talented and they're not giving me a proper chance. What it does is it sends a signal to you that says I'm more fit than I am. Conditioning, on the other hand, tells you, I don't care what level of talent you got, when I get done conditioning you, you're going to be able to hang in any situation. Hallelujah. And so conditioning is important for us to move into that next realm. And so faith vision allows us the insights and understanding of how to condition. Then there's interpreted vision. God is going to give visions, open-eye visions, and more than we've seen in the past. It's going to be a new dimension of frequency. They're going to occur much more than they have occurred before. People are going to be feeling like, man, everybody gave a vision. Yes, that's right. Because God is opening up the eyes, not just of one, but some. Not just many, but plenty. Not just for a few, but for those who will. God is going to open up the sight. He's going to open up their eyes so that they'll be able to understand that they see. And the sight comes by understanding of knowledge given by dreams and visions and an interpretation of tongues. You're going to see more people in the body of Christ interpreting tongues than we have seen in the past. Because a lot of times we speak in tongues and nobody interprets. That's true. And we're going to see when that comes, God is going to begin to charge people with those giftings to not be afraid anymore. Because there's somebody in there with interpretation, but they like that rather. Yeah. They're immobilized. And we're going to see a releasing of those giftings and a releasing of that God begins to move us into that place so that we begin to see that function. Yeah. Then there's prophetic vision. Prophetic vision is the foreknowledge and the foretelling of what's coming. It is Holy Ghost inspired. It is decrees and appropriations of the Word of God given by the direction of the Holy Ghost inspired. Even you're going to see inspirational writings. You're going to see people begin to write from the inspiration of the Holy Ghost as they get the vision that's prophetic. They're going to begin to put together information so that they can mass produce that information and get it out to people in mass and not just onesie-twosies. Because this is the time that things is happening fast. And with quantum leaps, one of the things that we've done of late is the cyber age has taken us into information disclosure at a much faster rate. Yeah. So now we have the ability to do things that took us 10 years, 10 minutes. We have computers, supercomputers that can through algorithms can figure out information that we could not figure out before. The space program has grown through quantum leaps because the things that they used to take years and years to find out, they're finding out in weeks as a result of the algorithms and the computers. And so when you move fast, you connect the dots quicker. Come on, somebody. And so what they're learning from the Hubble scope and what they're learning from the satellites and what they're learning in the transmission of the data as it coagulates and comes together, now a picture or a vision is produced, and based on that picture, they can operate at a higher level than we used to operate. Now, you know, men can do that in the natural. How much more can God? Y'all think this stuff, God allowed this to happen for men and men's purposes? This is for the plans of God.
Yes, it is.
This is for the purposes of God. This is for the manifestation of the will of God. Thy will be done, thy kingdom come in earth as it is in heaven. Hallelujah. Heaven is a panorama where there is no time. Heaven is not bound by time. Time is for men, so that men will have schedules, so that men will know what it is, what period it is, and what is the function of that period, and how long they have to produce during that period. And we call that time. Are you on time? Are you ready in time? You know, but God is always ready. It's a panorama. He's not bound by time. He's the Alpha and the Omega.
Yeah.
So he's producing from realm to realm. Hallelujah. All, hallelujah, the time. Hallelujah. He's always producing. He don't sleep. He's the Lord our God. Hallelujah. He's neither slumbers nor sleep. Then there is spiritual vision. Now, spiritual vision is the act of seeing via the word, and the Bible is illuminated. The light of Jesus develops your sight line, your sensitivity, and your understanding. You're going to begin to read the Bible, and the illumination is going to come off the pages as never before. Hallelujah. So there will be revelation. Hallelujah. We used to say revelation, application. Hallelujah. Manifestation. But in this season, it's going into the fivefold realm. There'll be revelation, application, manifestation, illumination, and then inspiration. The illumination comes so that you can see clearly. 2020 is an illumination year. And then 2021 is the inspiration to keep you keeping on in spite of what you see. To keep you keeping on when you can't see your way. To keep you from keeping on when God has told you to do something and it has not manifested yet. He has inspired us to pursue. To pursue. To pursue, overtake. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Look at Joshua. Joshua said, if you keep the sun up 24 hours, I'll run your enemies down and beat them in the dust. Joshua, one of my favorites. Joshua and David is the athletes of the Bible. You don't want to mess with them boys. Hallelujah. You don't want to mess with them. I will run you down and smoke you in the corner of your eye. Hallelujah. I will run you down and dust you off, oh my God. You can't run fast enough. I will catch you, I will pursue, I will not stop until I grind you in the dust. And get this, the sun is stand up on my command. Can you imagine them folks? Hallelujah. When Joshua got on and they started running, they said, well, it's going to be all right because it's going to get dark in a minute. It's going to get dark in a minute. He ain't going to be able to see us. You know, don't you know all the devil's strategies fail? The stuff that he's used to doing in the old way, God will do something brand new. The sun had never stood still at the hearken to the voice of a man. It was a new thing that was done, and the demons and the agents of the demon didn't know how to combat it because they had an expectation of the same old, same old. God's getting ready to do something that's so new that when you set out after the enemy, he's going to think, hallelujah, in a minute, I'm going to get some relief, but relief is not going to come. Relief is not going to be received because we, hallelujah, are going to overtake. We're going to pursue and overtake. And God is setting up this season and this time for that. Number 7 is divine vision. Divine vision, and somebody said, well, is that like spiritual vision? No, just listen to me. Divine vision is gained through obedience and diligence of seeking and proper application. You can't just do it, you got to do it right. That's how. See, God invests on the highest return. See, we think, well, you know, everybody ought to have a good chance. You know, by God, give them 1 5, 1 2 talents, and 1 talent. Because he gave it according to their several abilities, according to the power that works in you. Some of us don't have 5 talent power working in you. You got 2 talent power. Come on, somebody. Yeah. But when you have that planted in you and you produce at that level, God rewards you by doubling. Hallelujah. And then he got 5, he gained 5, and then the one that lost his because he hid it in the earth by not doing or following the process, by not having divine vision and not following the application, he lost it. He lost it. And then what happened? Did he give it to the one that had 2 talents? They gained the other 2? No, he gave it to the one that had 5. Because God invests at the highest level of return. Come on, that's what happens on Wall Street. They don't go invest with the Lord. I said, we need to give them some more. It don't work like that. It don't work like that. I don't work like that. I'm investing at the highest level of return. Come on, somebody. Hallelujah. God is investing in us at high return level. He is the Lord of the increase. So if we want to operate with the Lord of increase, we're going to have to get on his program and quit trying to get him on our program.
Uh-oh, come on.
Because see, some of us got some programs. We got some programs. God tell you to do this, and you say, yeah, but I have to be careful. How can we tell God we got to be careful? Like God don't know. Come on, somebody. That's like telling him you don't trust him. That's like telling him that I've been doing this, and I got this. You ain't been doing nothing. If you did anything, it's because God bless you. Quit tripping, Pookie. Come on, somebody. Hallelujah. So we need to have the understanding to move into these sight lines so that we can see the benefit of what God is doing. Now, God has set an open door in 2020. All right? The open door in 2020. We're prepping for the open door. You're prepping in the open door. Some of you are going to see some great returns on your investments. So I like your affirmation. We have an affirmation too. I like what it was saying in it, because debt resolution, debt elimination, increase, all of those things we can decree. We can walk, but we walk in them at a greater level of power when we understand and have the vision of what God is doing in that season. So God, if you'll be obedient in the small things, then he will make you increase. You know, but if you can't be obedient in the small things, don't be looking for no big time. Come on. As a matter of fact, if you can decrease. That's what the lesson was with the guy with 1 talent. So God is saying to us, see this the way I'm seeing it. I've designed the views and the precepts and the purposes have been established to benefit kingdom. Divine vision is kingdom sight vision. God will bring us into the kind of vision that manifests. He'll bless you. He'll bless you. You'll be making, before you can plan for the money that you have, he'll be making you some more money. Come on, somebody. You'll be, ooh, I didn't expect this. Come on, somebody. Because that's the way God's operating. And those who will be obedient to him is going to see the operation correlate with their obedience. Okay. Open door. 2020. Open door. So in 2020, there's an open door. And every open door is an entry into a platform. Into a platform. God don't open the door for you just to go in there, look around, and say, ooh, this is nice. No. The door has been opened for you to go in there and do something and to increase according to what is already planned. So open doors establish platforms. Okay? So God is going to be giving more platforms to those who are obedient. You're going to see people who've been in relatively obscurity all of a sudden coming into these vast platforms. And some of them are going to be on television, and some of them are going to be so vast until people are going to say, well, where did he come from? And some of them is going to really fool people, because people are going to feel like that's a young man's game. But God is going to have some Abrahams raising up. Come on. He's going to begin to move in a way that, hallelujah, your age or your season is inconsequential to him. Come on, somebody. He's bringing people into season because of their obedience, hallelujah, and their choice. And so when these platforms come, every platform is comprised of levels. Okay? So you always hear people say, I'm going to another level. So the levels take us to another whole place. And that place that the levels take us is dimensions. Okay? God wants to get you at a different level from glory to glory so that God can begin to give you dominion and dimension power. God wants to give you dominion power, and you need a dominion of operation, but you also need a dimension of the fulfillment of that operation. So God is taking now and bringing us into what the dominating position. God wants you to dominate. God wants you to overtake. God wants you to be territorial. God wants you to be in the region and establish the dominancy in the region for him. He's calling out dominators.
Yeah! Hallelujah!
In those dimensions. And every dimension is comprised, realms is comprised of dimensions. So when you operate in dimensions, then if we're faithful, God will take us to realms. Realms is the place of power. It's the place. You see some of these people in these giftings, and they can lay hands and do these things. Those are realms of authority through obedience that they have come through the graces of God to speak in the heavenlies of dimensions so that they can overthrow principalities. We're going to begin to see this happening more and more in the earth, because this is the age of the body of Christ, the membership body of Christ, moving in these applications, not just pastors and teachers and evangelists and prophets and apostles. It's not just, you're going to see a membership function where the members are going to be able to access these authorities on the basis of their obedience. On their obedience. Hallelujah. God is picking up people. Look at in Scripture in Acts 2, Cornelius. Cornelius wasn't even a Jew. In fact, he was a Roman soldier. In fact, it was unlawful for the Jews to eat with him. In fact, he was an undercover Christian. Hallelujah. Because in the Roman army, to take that stand could have meant not only demotion, but it could have meant death. But God used Peter to minister to Cornelius and to take him. He gave him an open door, the door of faith, and to bring him to a platform that showed him a whole new dimension. He didn't know nothing about the Holy Ghost. He was the first non-Jew. He was the first Gentile in Scripture to get the baptism of the Holy Ghost. Philip was at Caesarea. He could have used Philip. Hallelujah. But he didn't. He sent Peter to cultivate and prep. Come on, a centurion who was Roman to get the baptism of the Holy Ghost. And it was Hebrews that hadn't got the baptism of the Holy Ghost. See, y'all don't hear me. God don't care nothing about these titles. God don't care nothing about this stuff. Who you think you are. God don't care nothing about, what you... God will take anybody that was ready. Hallelujah. And willing and committed. Hallelujah. This man Cornelius was submitted. He gave of his substance. He gave more alms. God said, boy, you give so much you can come up before me in the memorial. I can't even look. I'm walking around heaven and there go your memorial. Hallelujah. You just keep coming up. Hallelujah. And you're so devout. Hallelujah. You ain't just talking it. You walking it like you talking. And not only that, you doing it with vigor. Hallelujah. You ain't tired. Hallelujah. See, he was a soldier. He understood discipline. He understood how to go forth. He understood fighting. And he said, if I fight this way, hallelujah, for an emperor, how much more?
My God.
Will I do it for my God? That's what God is going to use in this stage, in this age.
Amen.
And see, after we operate and get into those realms, then there's kingdom. See, we're not going to see this unless we understand the sightlines. Because the kingdom operations are the functions to advance and manifest the kingdom. Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, neither has it entered into the hearts of man. The thing that God has in store for those that love him. The things that God has in store for those who love him is going to be seen, captivated, and moved into as we walk in kingdom experience.
Yes. Amen.
It's not going to come with earthly experience. Thy will be done, thy kingdom come in earth. When the kingdom comes in earth, then we'll see the operations as in heaven.
Hallelujah.
And the earthlings, you and I, come on, some of the people who live on the earth, how they believe him are going to be the manifestors of that coming of the kingdom, because the kingdom of God is in us. And so we are in a place now that now as we begin to operate in realms, we get kingdom dimension and kingdom function and kingdom ability. Kingdom ability. To be able to produce like God says we should produce. I'm just about done. I want to give you 5 things. I'm going to give them real quick. That is going to help you to enter in to the sight line position, those 7 sight lines I gave you. We're going to be doing our workshop tomorrow. Prophetess Johnson is going to be ministering on discernment. She has a keen sense of discernment. I'll be doing the prepping and ready. Then next Saturday we'll move into the next dimension. And we're not just going to teach it now, we're going to be training and activating and going into those areas so that we can equip you to see these sight lines, because I need you. Amen. And it's open to the public. It's a $10 walk-up fee. Amen. Some of the people are pre-registered at $7.50. And that's basically because we're giving you breakfast and lunch. Amen. We wanted to make it as inexpensive as we could, but I knew we need to feed folks. If you want to learn and to study, amen, and get this, 5 things. 1 is humility. The top prepping tool that God is going to use is humility. Humility. 2 Chronicles 7:14 said, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, repent from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and heal their land. The healing of our land is in our hands, folks. I know we think it's the politicians, but it ain't. God is not. God is speaking truth. And he said, if my people do this, I don't care what the Congress do. If my people do this, I don't care what the Senate do. If my people do this, I don't care what the president do. If my people do this, then I'll heal their land. I'll do it. So we got to come humble. We got to humble ourselves before the mighty hand of God. Don't make him humble you. Humble yourself. Number 2 is service. Him who would be great, let him serve. Romans 12:11 says we're to serve with fervency of spirit of Jesus Christ. Don't be listless in your service. Be vigorous in your service. Serve with vigor. Don't be like, well, I'll do it if I have to. Then look, you might as well not do it, because your attitude has already concluded what your production will be.
Amen.
Your attitude determines the altitude. It determines how high the standard will be.
Amen.
Hallelujah. And we're getting too many low standard offerings. And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about low standard offerings of service, of time. We serve half-heartedly. We're supposed to serve unto the Lord. Is the apostle going to be there tonight? Who you serve? You serve. Who you serving?
That's right.
You need to do it as unto the Lord.
Amen.
So service. Then number 3 is prayer. Prayer that gives us strategies. Prayer that sets us up for objectives and goals. Prayer that is strategic to bring about the will of God. 4 is our presentation. Romans 12:1. I beseech you therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your body a holy sacrifice, a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable, which is your reasonable service.
Amen.
Your presentation is important. Don't let nobody tell you that you can do it any kind of way. No, you need to do it, hallelujah, holy.
Amen.
Holiness still counts. Number 1.
Yes. Hallelujah.
I don't care how much intellect you got, you need to be holy. I don't care how much kind of skill you think you got, you need to be holy. I don't care how slick you think you are, because some people just think they're slicker than me. Hallelujah. Yeah, breathe. Come on, somebody. But you got to be holy.
Holy.
You got to be holy. All right?
Yes.
Then the last one is renewing your mind. These 5 prepping keys is what's going to get us ready so that we can take advantage of 2020, 19 the prepping, taking advantage of 2020, and 2021, the year of triple trinity. 7 being the number of perfection and completion. 7 representing the fullness of God. Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Biblically, numerically is 21. The year 2021, we're going to see manifestations. Manifestations that renews your mind. And our mind's going to have to be renewed for us to capitalize on our trajectory. Is going to be determined by our renewed mind. The Bible says in 12:2 and 3 that be not conformed to this world. Can't be doing it like the world. Your mind gets clouded. Can't be doing it like the world. You won't have the same sight line. Can't be performing like the world. It will mess you up. It will corrode the battery, if you will. You have a battery, but it won't stop. Come on, somebody. We got to renew our minds so we're not conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of your mind. With the washing of the word. Yes, sir. Now when we do that, now we'll be able to prove what is a good and perfect and acceptable will of God. It is key for us to have a renewed mind.
Yes.
Your mind has to be refreshed daily. Your mind has to be refreshed. When you set about the things of God and set out to do the things of God, you have to keep your mind refreshed. You need to put you on some gospel, not just inspiration. Put some gospel on. Let the word of God be in song be going forward. Hallelujah. Because everything that's musical now is not gospel. Hallelujah. I don't care if they do put it in the gospel category. If it's not singing the word and saying the word, it's not gospel. And some inspiration, come on, somebody. But we got to renew our mind. We got to hear that word. Hallelujah. Because your mind gets polluted by the environment that you're in. Y'all don't hear me. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Some places you go in the war, you got to come out, hallelujah, and scrub. When doctors go in to a disease area, they go in there to heal. But guess what? They go scrub.
They wash out. Hallelujah.
They wash before they go in, they wash out. Hallelujah. They don't just go in there and come out and then go home. Hallelujah. Because it's disease, because they've been in the environment that's not sterile. So we got to renew our minds. And some of the stuff we see and we sit next to and sit around, hallelujah. We need a mind scrub. We need to renew our minds.
Yes, sir.
Hallelujah. And finally, my brother, I'm finishing with this. It's going to be a year of dramatic restoration. You said it today. Rest. He's leading us into rest. Hallelujah. God gave me a definition of that word. He said, son, the prefix of that word is rest.
Yes, sir.
So I want to bring my people into rest. He said, but not only am I going to bring them into rest, I'm going to bring them into supernatural divine provision, which is stored.
Yes.
I have stored up for you. I have stored up for you providentially provisions. I'm going to put you in rest, and then I'm going to put you in the place of your storage.
My God, Jesus.
Ration means, as the word ration. Meaning that God is going to release it at key moments in your life to continually restore you, not according to how a man would restore you, but according to the design that he made you in before the foundations of the world. God is going to restore us to a place that reflects kingdom and the kingdom design. As we walk in these places on sightlines. Stand on your feet for a moment. I'm done. Restoration. Restoration.
My God, Jesus. Hallelujah.
Restoration.
Hallelujah.
Sightlines.
Jesus.
I want to thank all the people from Divine Grace Ministries. Just wave your hands. I know some of them left. Amen. And they're trying to get home so they can be at that workshop in the morning. Amen. 8:30 we'll be in the workshop. Amen. I'm looking for you. Amen. Because I got to train now. I've already taught you. Got to train. God is bringing us to great restoration. 2021. We're going to see divine manifestation, and it's going to be in such a degree that it's going to wow us. They're going to be wowing with, you know, we're going to have folks that ain't saved saying, wow.
Yes.
It's going to wow the world here. Amen. Because we're going to see, I believe, we're going to see some of the first major transfers of wealth from the wicked being transferred to the righteous. We want to see that. Amen. A lot of people not going to like that. I know, a lot of people in church, they're like, ooh, that's good. But it's going to be a lot of people that's going to call that wealth distribution and socialism and that kind of thing. But God is getting ready to do something where He tips the scales and balances the scales. We had that happen in 2008, and a lot of people didn't even know it. It was a Shemitah year. If you study Shemitah, it is the year that God balances the righteous and the unrighteous, balances the scales. And you've seen God begin to balance the scale. The price of gasoline went down. The stock market hit its all-time lows. There was a redirection of the banking system because there had been evil use of these systems to oppress. And God reconfigured it and made that whole country begin to share those deficits. The banking and insurance systems. And that was a Shemitah year. But we're getting ready to come into a year not unlike that, but you're going to see wealth transformation. I believe 2021 is going to be some of the most obvious ones as God begins to transfer wealth. And it's going to be people who are going to try to stop it, but they're not going to be able to stop it. And that's what's going to wow people. That's what's going to wow people. It's like he did with the Israelites. They got 48, they got a piece of land that was full of deserts and mosquitoes. And the Egyptians gave, and the Arab nations gave it to them. Because they said it wasn't any good. And God caused the desert to bloom. And he caused it to rise up and be one of the most powerful nations. Look at small Israel. And it's producing. And it's said that it sits on the largest water reserves, underground water reserve pools in the world. We think it's oil, but I'm telling you, the way of oil is changing. The cold fusion, instead of cleaner, water is going to be. You know, they was digging a pipeline in Israel. Everybody said, well, they thought it was for oil. And it's for water. Because in the coming age, water is going to be so much more better. Think about it when you were young. You just turned your tap on, drank the water. Drink it from the water hose. And I remember my teacher telling me, I graduated in 1972 from DD, that the time was coming when we would be buying our water out of bottles. And we will be paying for it like we do beverages. And people will have in their home water purification. I got all that now. And I was thinking like, man, I am not going to be paying no money for a bottle of water. You know, I'm going to get me a 7-Up or something. I am not going to be. But here it is.
That's right. Amen.
With electrolytes. And you see bottled water. Water is becoming more scarce. Father, I prophesy over this audience. I prophesy over this congregation. Every ministry gift, Lord, every membership gift. Lord, I prophesy, Lord, that this word will resonate in them. And that they, God, would allow it to make room and be stirred. So that they'll walk in another dimension. And Lord, as this word from each sight line begins to manifest, cause them to be agents in the earth for the manifestation and the preparation of others. Cause them, God, to walk in a level of ministry that will bless others. I prophesy over the leaders of this house, 36 years of faithfulness, 36 years of vision, 36 years. But the Lord is saying, son, the best is yet to come. I'm going to do a new thing in you. I'm bringing you to new territories, new dimensions in that territory, new operations in that territory, new assignments in that territory, new wealth in that territory, and longevity and peace. And prophetess, the Lord is saying, daughter, even the season of restoration is here. He said for me to tell you, you're made it. You made it. You made it. The devil tried to you, but you made it. He said you made it. I don't care what you hear, you made it. You made it. For I have restored you. And you shall walk in a new dimension of my grace and my glory. Father, I pray blessings over this ministry. God, that it begins to expand even greater. And that this house will be a house of increase that will serve others. A house of increase of the word of wisdom. A house of increase for the word of knowledge. A house of increase for understanding. A house of increase for the distribution of ministry and equipping the body. Even a reservoir for the thirsty, that many shall come and drink. And many shall transition because they're coming shall remain with them, and they shall be connected. Even now, we call it done. In Jesus' name, amen. Give the Lord a hand clap of praise. 36 years of service. I just had my 25th year this year, and it was wonderful. And I can only imagine 36, y'all better be 40 here. Years in ministry. 40 is very significant. It is the season of trial and promotion and qualification for elevation. Amen. I told the Lord, I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, what does 25 mean? And he showed me a scripture. And so I check all of them. He showed me a scripture. I was like, he said, it is the beginning of ministry. I said, 25 years. 25 years and I'm in the beginning. I was getting ready to shout. I said, oh God. Hallelujah. But that's all right. Amen. Amen. It's a very significant time. We just pray blessings. Amen. Hun, I want you to come for a moment here. I perceive you have a word to minister and prophecy.
Daughter, even I hear the Lord saying, truly, you have gone through the trials and tribulations. But I hear the Lord saying, daughter, know that my hand is upon your life. And even I hear the Lord saying, the books that I've given you, and the Lord said that they're about to come forth. But the Lord said, that I've birthed deep down on the inside of you, the enemy has tried to block. But I hear the Lord saying, daughter, that I've placed and that I desire to come forth, he cannot stop, he cannot hinder, for my hand is upon your life. And even I hear the Lord saying, even the other day as you were before him, and I saw you walking the floor and you were talking to the Lord about some things. And the Lord
then I'll end. Then we'll have an offering for the man of God as well.
Well, I just felt that, I don't know how many years I've known Apostle Bobby Johnson and Prophetess Mary. I remember being at Victorious Believers, and she just got in the car and sat with me. And we were holding hands, and the Lord said, that's supposed to be your friend. And we've been friends ever since then. And we have fellowship with them, and we haven't been doing much like our life. They've been traveling so much. God is really using them. But I felt to say, you want to see a true apostle, you saw one today. You want to see a true prophetess, you saw one. The real prophets are not profiteers. The real prophets declare the word of the Lord. The true apostles establish people. And what you heard this evening, that Apostle Bobby is working on establishing his people, and even prophetess, they're being greatly used. So I want you to know, we would like to fellowship with more people like this. I don't have time for place. We want to be around people that steadfast and unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. Like draws like. How many enjoyed that good word this evening? That was an establishing word. That was a foundational word. Amen? So I just loved it and enjoyed it. It was great. It was not emotionalism. It was just pure spirit-to-spirit communication. It's going to take that and some more. It's going to take that and some more. You need to get the CD, $5, Marianne, for the CD, $5. That's very cheap. And get that word and listen to it over and over. Did that go off? And something I heard, I was... This morning I woke up early and I got a chance to watch 2 Jewish broadcasts. And they were teaching on praise and worship. It was so wonderful. I clicked record. And then the other one was teaching on the shofar and about the silver trumpets. I remember at 719 Emerson, some pastors came from Grand Rapids. They opened our door. They had 2 silver trumpets, and they blew them. So many things have happened that happened at the old church that you weren't there, but God has already established us in the spirit. We had visitors from all over the world in that little teeny tiny building. People were coming, and now, things are happening. The shofars are being blown. I tell you, I'm excited because we're going into a new dimension of warfare. And the Lord told me, spiritual protocol, get back into his presence. You draw nigh to God, he'll draw nigh to you. It's old business is over as usual. It's time to do a new thing. It's time to activate again. It's time to get back into praise and worship. Come on now. Come on, enter his gates. Don't act like you in church. Act like you know where you are. Act like you know what's going on. Expecting supernatural intervention of God. And I believe tonight miracles was here. The brother from Flint, I just love him. Comes down for my worshiping warriors fellowship. When you were playing, brother, I heard a song just as clear as day of praise when you were playing. So there's music all around you. There's new songs. You just need to tap into them. They are there. Amen. I can hear it. Hallelujah. And the song I heard was you were playing His Grace is Sufficient. That's what I heard. And it was very pretty and melodious. So I want you to know you tap into that song's anointing and let God use you in such a time as this. And thank everybody for coming. My friends are here. We have a good time when we sing one another. We just got to do more fellowship. And I would be there tomorrow if I could, but my sister Joyce is being honored tomorrow over there at Horizons. So we're scheduled very early to go over there tomorrow. Love you. Glad you're here. Amen.
Praise the Lord. I certainly echo what my wife said concerning the delegation that came out from Divine Grace Ministry and our other friends that are here. We love you in the Lord. We thank you for considering us and celebrating with us for 36 years. We look to continue to move on and to do greater things. We certainly receive the word. Amen. The sight lines that we need to establish in our life, but also we thank God for the prophetic word that was rendered to us. Let me say that the operative term for us, and I trust for you as well as you took what Apostle said, correlated it in your life, and it goes like this. that we have to stay in the process. Say, I must stay in the process. That's right, we have to stay in the process. And we have, as pastors, and we have taught and trained our people, stay in the process. We have, I believe, the best members, best sons and daughters this side of heaven here at Center of Attraction Outreach. And I tell you that we are staying in the process because God is still up to something. He is still on the move. And we're going to be frontline ministers. We're going to be frontline church. We're going to be frontline servants of the Most High. Amen. Well, it's offering time again. Hallelujah.